Okay, so let's start. Here we are again. Week, I don't know how many times we've done this, probably about 20 some odd weeks every other week, or maybe even more. I guess the war's been going on longer than that. 26, I'm being told. 26th time we're doing this. I'm not sure if we started the first beginning of the war, but I guess maybe we did. So okay, 26th time that we're doing this. Um, it's hard to say where exactly we stand. We stand in some very weird place at the moment. I ran into a friend on the street 2 hours ago. She happens to be the vice president of one of the largest defense contractors in Israel. And um, I said to her, Marc Schulman, how are you doing? And she said, well, depending, we're waiting to see what the next attack is going to look like from Iran. Um, I don't think we all obsess about that all the time, but it's clearly there. And it's clearly just another part of living with not knowing, having any idea what's likely to happen in the coming days or weeks. There's also, and I'll get into it to some extent in a few minutes, the shall we call it the newest scandal, security scandal that's going on, which also contributes to the feeling that none of us have any control over what's happening. Not that individually we expect to, but on a societal aspect, there is that sense, and the sense that nothing is going to change in terms of the ultra-Orthodox draft. The government's passing a law that's going to put things off some more, most likely. I'll get into that in a little bit also. Uh, and there's the constant, every single day we lose a soldier or two. This morning, once more, woke up to the fact that a soldier died in Gaza from a grenade. And also, one of the people who were wounded, I guess it was last week in Nahariya, from a drone, died from his wounds. So adds to the constant, you know, drumbeat of bad news. Um, in addition, just now for the last 40 minutes or 35 minutes, my phone was lit up with warnings about a drone that was slowly making its way south. It got as far as Haifa, went beyond Haifa, but then the Air Force said it was being watched, and I guess they finally decided to take it down, or they got I'm not sure how they took it down. Hopefully they're being smarter these days, and they're able to bring a helicopter gunship into place and use that to take down the drone. The advantage of the helicopter gunship is, of course, number one, it's not a one-shot deal. If it doesn't get it the first time, it gets it the second time and the third time because the helicopters fly faster than drones. Plus, you don't have the additional damage that's often caused by interceptors that miss and then land on the ground, and some parts of it actually have hurt people a number of times. Intercepting a drone with a missile is a very bad plan from both a tactical standpoint because of what I just said, and of course from an economic standpoint. Each one of those interceptors is at least $10,000, maybe more, and of course you're against a $500 drone in many cases. So using gunships that fire bullets is a much better way, and we seem to be using it more and more now. I'm hoping it's a general directive of how we're going to be going forward with it. So where do we stand? So let's start with Iran. There are so many different threats that have come out of Iran in the last 48 hours that we have absolutely no idea which is accurate, which is just being thrown out there. Yesterday or last night, it was said they were warned that the attack is going to be much bigger than the last one. We don't have any idea how big it's going to be this time. Not only the Revolutionary Guard, but also the army is going to participate in it. And then another report, it's all going to come from Iraq, so that we won't retaliate against Iran, which is nonsensical because if they come from Iranian forces in Iraq, we're not going to attack the government of Iraq, which is under semi-protection of the United States. We're going to attack Iran. So that doesn't make any sense. Logic would say they wouldn't attack, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of logic in what's going on at this point. It makes no logical sense for them to attack us at this point because they are now open for any counterattack. The elections in the States, as you all know, are 3 days away or 2 days away, I guess, at this point. And after that, no one can say from our counterattack that we're influencing the elections. I was never quite sure, and I've written this before, that I have no idea how um, how the attack or lack of attack, or how we want to look at it, by Israel on Iran or vice versa is going to influence the elections. I never quite understood how it makes a difference one way or another, but let's assume it does, or let's forget the fact maybe it really doesn't. But whoever loses will claim it was because, well, some people will claim it's because Israel did X, Y, and Z. So as far as I'm concerned, it's much better that that the next round take place after Tuesday, or from Tuesday night on American time, because at that point, whatever it is, they can't blame us, so to speak. It's always good to blame the Israelis, blame the Jews. So I'm all in favor of whatever happens after the election, and it doesn't matter who gets elected in terms of what our response will be. I don't think it makes any difference at all. So again, I don't understand the Iranians, but then going way back when, they may be telling themselves a story that's just not true. And we've often had that, and I don't want to repeat the halfway, I don't know if it's racist because it's true, but a halfway story that I took. I can still remember hearing from my grandfather, my Zaidi, when he died when I was about 17. I probably heard it to him when I was 14 or 15 about Arabs believing their own lies. And it's proven true over the decades since then. They tell themselves a story often, and then they believe their own story, and so that's very destructive. And it's happened more than once. Um, I assume it's happening again in terms of Iran. Um, again, if they attack us again, we'll have to decide whether we want to go after economic targets, governmental targets, or the nuclear targets. Um, in some ways, going after economic targets and governmental targets might be more effective because it's unclear that we have the capability of really destroying the nuclear program at this point. And so if you can't destroy it, then attacking it may be counterintuitive, and it might be better to do things that will undermine the regime, because the only solution to events here is a change in regime in Iran. It's long overdue. There is a government that is, violently unpopular amongst its own people. People are afraid. But if we show different ways when the government is weak, that's the last thing dictators can show is weakness, and that may be the reason they're planning to attack us, to show they are strong. But that will be undermined by what will happen afterwards. So, in my mind, I would hit whatever targets that people who have better expertise in Iran than I do believe would undermine the regime, undermine the economy, undermine the regime. Those are the targets we should be hitting, and those should probably be soft targets. It'd be very easy for us to hit those targets, whether they're power plants or whether they're oil terminals or whatever it might be. If they attack us, that's what we should do. We need to do everything we can to undermine the Iranian regime. I don't know what will come of it. I don't know if the people of Iran are ready to take the steps. I don't know whether the government of the United States is willing to help. A lot of open questions. But I found it interesting that when Kamala Harris was asked who's the biggest enemy of the United States, she said Iran. So I found that interesting. I have no idea whether she really believes that or not, but that was the answer she gave. It wasn't Russia, it wasn't China, it was Iran. And clearly that's our biggest enemy. So let's hope. We've been playing this game. A few people have been reading my history section. The game has been played going back with Hamas now, from the time they came to power. Tonight we'll get up to one of the early wars, Operation, I think it was Lead Cast, I think it was called, which I just finished writing about. That was one of the many wars we fought with Hamas, but we never really finished them. So, and it's hard to figure out how to finish them unless you bring someone else to power. That's a separate issue. So that's with Iran at the moment. We don't know where it's going to go. It's very interesting that the United States sent B-52 bombers to the Middle East right now. Everything they sent until now were clearly defensive. Uh, this defensive aircraft, defensive ships, etc. B-52s have only one value, and that's offensive. Again, it may be saying to the Iranians that beware, we might actually participate in an Israeli counterattack after the elections. Again, I'm not putting my money on it. I wouldn't bet in Las Vegas that's going to happen. But if I'm the Iranians and I see B-52 bombers, I have to ask myself, am I sure it's not going to happen? And they have to be asking themselves that question. Again, once the election happens, whoever wins, Biden is in power for 3 more months, and he's free to do whatever he thinks is right for Israel and for the Middle East in his perspective. And there's nothing really to stop him from doing it. He has no political concerns to worry about. He's the lame duck. He can either leave Trump a mess or leave Harris a mess or solve the problems for them before they come to office. So we'll have to see. But if I'm the Iranians, I would be concerned about the lame duck period in the United States. People often make the mistake when they look at the United States and they think about the lame duck period. After a lame duck means he has no power. He's a lame duck. But the American presidential system is such that certainly when it comes to issues of war, presidents have fairly unlimited powers up to a certain point. In the first few days of a war, there's nothing that can stop the president from taking action. He then has to call the War Powers Act, depending on what's done. But initially, there's nothing to stop him. And of course, thanks to the Supreme Court decision, he can violate the law now. And the same way that Trump cannot be held responsible if he violates the law. If Biden violates the War Powers Act, he can't be held liable because that's what the Supreme Court decided. So we'll have to see. Everything is on the table. It's all open. Period of unusual, if that's the case, uncertainty, to say the least. I'm going to get to Gaza at the end because I want to talk about Gaza when we bring in the question of this new scandal that's developed in Israel in the last few days. In any case, Lebanon. So Lebanon, the issue is we've successfully taken hold of the first line of all of the villages from the border, and in some cases the second line of villages. We have not gone further, and that was on purpose. It's not clear if that's a good purpose or a bad purpose. What we've done is we've moved beyond so that there's no direct sight for anti-tank rockets from Lebanon into Israel. Now, if you remember over the last year, those were the most dangerous because they're A, they fly fast and low, and B, they can be aimed at a particular location, as opposed to their rockets, which are shoot them and hope they land on a target, so to speak, because there's no accuracy whatsoever to those rockets. The anti-tank ones, however, are very, very effective in terms of their ability to hit specific targets, but they're line of sight only. So they can only be used if you can see where you're firing to. They're not over the hill, only line of sight. So Israel has now taken all of the territory that is within line of sight of the Israeli towns and villages on the border. That does not stop the rocket fire, as we've seen. However, the amount of rocket fire that is coming to Israel is considerably lower in the last days. There have been continuously firing from Lebanon. However, the amount of rockets in each barrage has been steadily going down. About an hour ago, there was a barrage at Haifa. All of Haifa and the whole area was under rocket attack, but altogether they fired 2 rockets. If they fire 2 rockets, the chances of Iron Dome knocking them down are very close to 100%. The only time we start having problems when they fire 15, 20 rockets at the same time. When they fire 2 rockets, especially Haifa, which is a little bit further from the border, chances of getting through to Haifa are, I won't say 0 because always something can go wrong, but are very close to 0. So they just don't have that many rockets left, it would seem. I'm sure they have some, and the Israeli army said 2 days ago that they have 20% of their rockets are left. 20% is still a fair number if you figure they had 140,000 when the war started. So 20,000 is still over 20% is still 25,000. However, most of those are short range, and when they said they had 140,000, that included mortars and included short range rockets. And the shortest range rockets are now probably out of rocket range from where they can be fired from. Um, so they're still firing. Hezbollah stated today that they will not agree to ceasefire negotiations while war is going on. We will not stop the war unless we come to an agreement. It makes no sense for Israel to stop firing for any period of time in terms of Lebanon without an agreement. So it's a little bit of a standoff now. Hezbollah needs an agreement more than we do in that sense. So I believe we will come to some sort of agreement with Hezbollah. Will it be a perfect agreement? No, it won't be a perfect agreement. There is no perfect as long as Hezbollah still exists. Hezbollah is going to still exist as long as Iran remains under the control of the Ayatollahs, because Iran finances them and controls them. But it's a question of whether we've weakened them enough that the other parts of the Lebanese polity can take greater control of their own country. I don't know the answer to that. So far, we haven't seen a great deal of courage on their part, but we'll have to see. That really is the only solution. Again, it comes back to Iran. And as long as Iran is still doing what it's doing, nothing's going to be solved. Okay, let's go to Gaza for the moment. Let's go to where we stand with Gaza. We have been fighting in Jabalia now, which is in northern Gaza, a place that we had taken over theoretically twice before. We have been fighting to take it over again for almost 6 weeks now. We have a significant force, a division-sized force, fighting in Jabalia. Is a problem. There's two parts to the problem. One part is the fact that we wanted the population to leave, and they refused to leave. And so we can't do what we would like to do, which would be to flatten everything. So we can't do that. If we can't flatten it because people aren't leaving, it means fighting house to house, street to street. We always have the upper hand, but it's time consuming and it's costly. Then the question becomes, why? What are we accomplishing by doing that? We killed supposedly 900 Hamas people in the last couple of weeks there, took 300 more as prisoners. Okay, that's very nice. But how many more members of Hamas have joined Hamas since the war began? How many more 16-year-olds became 17-year-olds in Gaza since the war began? And what percentage of them joined Hamas? We don't have any numbers, but I would have to assume a significant number, to say the least. So it's not at all clear what we're accomplishing. We come down to the same problem we've had all along. We do not have a plan for the day after, and the day after has long ago been here. It's long ago gone to the fact that we've conquered every part of Gaza and are back now for the second time and the third time. People say, well, why don't you hold on to the whole place at the same time? Well, guess what? The army is not large enough to do that. That's our reality. Our army is not large enough. Yes, we can hold a larger area if the people cooperate, but with people who are fighting us, there is no way we can hold all of Gaza simultaneously with the size of our army. It's certainly not while we're fighting at the same time in Lebanon. And even if we weren't fighting in Lebanon, we needed to keep a substantial amount of troops on the Lebanese border to protect against an attack from Lebanon by Hezbollah. So our army is not large enough to permanently occupy a large part of Gaza or all of Gaza at the same time, which comes down to the same problem we hear from, part of the far right wing says the only solution is, reoccupy Gaza. Well, that's very nice. Not that it worked out so well the first time, but leave that part aside. Again, we do not have an army large enough to do this. Our reservists, there are so many of them that are doing over 200 days this past year. Think about it. 2/3 of the year, you're in the army. But you're not a soldier. You're not someone who signed up in your 3 years of compulsory service or even, signed up for some more. You are somebody who has a family, who has a job or has a business. Think about it. You have a business. So you get some money from the army, but you don't get as much money because it's a catch-22. They only give you money based on the amount of money that your business has lost. While you're not in the army, while you're in the army, your business has gone down, so you base it on your income, and they don't give you even less money. It's a ridiculous system in that way. But so, regardless of that, you can't be in the army 2/3 of the year and run a business. You can't be in the army 2/3 of the year and keep a job. They can't fire you. You'll be at your job, but do you think you're going to move forward in that company? Is the company going to assign you a new project? Are they going to assign you new clients when you've been gone 2/3 of the time, and then the next, they know that in another month you're going to be sent away again? I mean, just yes, they can't fire you. You'll keep on getting a salary, but you're certainly not going to move forward in that company. You're certainly not going to do anything more interesting or anything else like that. And then think about students. The college year began, or university year began today in Israel's universities. This is the second year, and approximately 1/4 of the students in the Israeli universities are currently in reserve duty. There was just a survey that just came out today that 20% of the students at the universities require psychological assistance because of the PTSD that they all suffer from. 20% of the students. This is an incredible number. And, just when I say it's 20%, this is of all the students. It wasn't of the male students. I'm not sure it included the Arab students in the universities, but it's of all the students. It's just figure that 50% of the students are female. So and yes, there are women who are in the army too, and there are women who have been in combat, but not to the numbers at all as the men. So this is incredible numbers. It's an incredible burden, to say the least. And it's, I guess we're in the second year. Israel isn't built. The Israeli army wasn't built. The economy isn't built. The civilian population isn't built for year-long wars. Not since the War of Independence. The War of Independence was a whole other game. We're literally fighting for our independence, and at the end of the rainbow, there's going to be a free state of Israel. Right now, it's not at all clear, if at the end of the rainbow things will be much better. They'll be better temporarily, no doubt, but will we have solved any of the basic problems we have? I doubt it. Which brings me to two other factors. One, and this is related, of course. Now, again, the thing that I didn't mention until now are the hostages. The hostages, they're probably 50 or so still alive. That's the best guess at the moment. They're 50 alive. Maybe they're only 49. Maybe they're 48. They're dying. They clearly are. If you look at the weight of the 6 hostages that were killed by Hamas at the end, I mean, Hersh Goldberg was down to something like 90 pounds or something like that. Unbelievably, undernourished person. Basically, the level of people came out of concentration camps. And so, how many of these people? And then he was a young man. And how many of these people? How many older people are still alive? How many of them can still be alive? That's number one. Number two, look, the Hamas never changed what they wanted. They always wanted the end of the war in return for, or at least Israel pulling out of Gaza in return for releasing all the hostages. The Israeli plan that from May basically called for that. And the one that Biden then presented, which was originally his plan. And the reality was that Netanyahu backed away from his own plan. And he backed away from all his plan by basically suddenly bringing up the issue of Philadelphia and bringing up all sorts of issues. He partly did that, it turns out, as a result of some illegally obtained intelligence information and intelligence information that was then altered. And that's what this new case is all about. It turns out that a person who was his spokesman, but wasn't officially working for the prime minister's office because he didn't pass his security check, has been arrested and has been arrested at least a week or two ago, and is now today in the court. His arrest has been extended. He and 3 other people were arrested. One of them was released to home arrest, and 2 others are still being held in custody. And they're charged with taking action, making use of secret documents, and causing harm to Israel's war effort. What this was in reality was the attempt, it looks like, by Netanyahu's office, and I won't say it was Netanyahu, although anyone can make those connections. I don't know if anyone will see any proof, but to make use of to release these intelligence documents, one which appeared in the English Jewish Journal, and the other one appeared in Bind in Germany, which basically said that Sinwar was going to take the hostages across the Philadelphia corridor and smuggle them out to Egypt and then to Iran. And then the other one in the Bind, where it said that Hamas's whole goal is to separate the country and to get the people to fight against each other over the hostages. It turns out that at least one of the documents was a complete forgery, and the second one was not exactly accurate, but it was used by Netanyahu to explain why he couldn't go with a hostage deal that was on the table at the time. Clearly, I think there's a universal understanding in this country that there's a universal understanding that Netanyahu does not want an agreement. Does not want an agreement because if he gets an agreement, any sort of agreement that requires the release of terrorists, which are the very basis of the agreement. There's going to be no agreement without a release of terrorists. Both Smotrich and Ben-Gvir will oppose, and both Smotrich and Ben-Gvir will bring down his government. And so he is not willing to take that risk. I don't know what his own opinion is. He's also a little bit shell-shocked from what he did with Gilad Shalit when he let go more than 1,000 terrorists for getting back just Gilad Shalit. But whether he actually believes in giving back any hostages for terrorists, I don't really know. But the reality is that's the only way there was ever going to be a deal made, and that was clear from the very beginning. So the problem was, of course, all of these actions that were taken by the prime minister's actions or by the prime minister's office are clearly illegal. He made the claim over the weekend that the person wasn't part of the office staff. Unfortunately for him, because he was the spokesman, that he may have not been legally working for the prime minister's office because of the fact that he hadn't passed security clearance. He was getting paid by somebody, and he was working with Netanyahu, and all the reporters in the country knew that and met him with Netanyahu, et cetera, et cetera. So the statement has been proven to be just a complete fabrication on Netanyahu's part. But hey, what's new with that? That's been unfortunately, one of his hallmarks. His truth is not one of the things that he speaks very often, I'm afraid. So we're down to that at this point. One last thing, and then I'll open it up for questions, because this goes down to this whole onwards problem of what's going on with the government. The issue of the draft of the ultra-Orthodox. As you know, very little progress has been made. It's clear that a new law for making it for draft exemptions is not going to pass. So the attempt came back. Well, let's do something. One of the things that the Supreme Court decided when it said they had to be drafted was you can't give them any financial aid. So one of the things that stopped was financial aid for their daycare. Daycare is a subsidiary to pay for daycare centers for them, and they said they have to stop paying for that. So they're passing a special law that would enable the continued payments for their daycare centers. All those people who oppose giving the ultra-Orthodox a way of not participating as part of the army oppose this. The political parties, though, are mostly going along, although some of the members of Knesset suddenly have a spine about this, especially some of the people who come from the religious Zionist community who have paid an incredible price recently in terms of those who have died in the last month and a half. To very large numbers have come from their community. Not all of them, and not most of them have not been from their community, but a way out of proportion percentage based on their population have been from their community, and they've gotten more and more fed up with the fact that they're religious. They study Torah. Their kids go to yeshiva, through 12th grade, and then even study yeshiva a year later. But they all serve, and they just don't accept the idea that it's okay for the ultra-Orthodox to say, well, we can't serve because we're studying in yeshiva and we're saving the country by studying in yeshiva. Now your kids can go and save the country and give your lives. It just doesn't play very well. But anyway, the government today passed it in the government. It hasn't passed the Knesset. And this despite the fact that the legal advisor to the government stated that the law was unconstitutional and could not be passed. But the government pays no attention to her at this point. They don't really care what's constitutional or what's not. Israel doesn't have a constitution, but it's still considered lo chukatit, which Israel has this set of basic laws that have to be observed, and it's sort of Israel's constitution. She says you couldn't pass this. They do it anyway. It will eventually end up in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will overturn it, but in the meantime, the government will have gained some more months where they don't have to worry about the ultra-Orthodox. And clearly the army needs more people, and it's not getting it. Okay, I guess I'll open up for questions now. Raise your hand or whatever. Hopefully I'll see you, or my wife will yell at me and say, someone say. Paul.
Yeah, so two-part question relating to Hezbollah. There are some reports that Iran, of course, has basically said, we're willing to fight to the last Hezbollah soldier. Is there any dissension on Hezbollah's part, like, anger at Iran or unwilling to do Iran's bidding because of that?
Look, we don't really know. We only more recently started capturing prisoners as opposed to killing them. There was our commando raid yesterday where we managed to get a high-ranking Hezbollah member. I don't know, obviously there's a reason we did it. Let's put it that way. I have no idea what that reason was, but we did it. Then we captured a high-ranking member of Hezbollah. I assume we wanted certain war intelligence. Maybe we were also looking for some sort of insights into what they're thinking at this point. So we don't really know that. I mean, there is the resentment amongst the Lebanese. That clearly there's that resentment. But against the Iranians, don't really know. And you had second part.
Yeah, my second part is regarding a deal with Hezbollah. Uh, let's assume benefit of the doubt that there is quote unquote an enforceable deal, which obviously the old one was not, but an enforceable deal which keeps Hezbollah north of the Litani River, presumably their missiles out of range of Israel, but Hezbollah intact as a strong force there. Can Israel live with that?
Okay, look, what does that mean? Can Israel live with that? The reality is, if they're north of the Litani, I mean, we can live with it. It's not a great situation, but there's no way of. We can't go into Lebanon unless we're going to capture all of Lebanon and eliminate Hezbollah. The same way we can't eliminate Hamas in that sort of way. We can eliminate some of their capabilities. We can come to an agreement where they have to be north of Litani. We can hope the Lebanese decide that they don't want Hezbollah as an armed force within the country, that they don't want rockets, but it has to be the Lebanese to do it. We can't do it. We tried in Lebanon in 1982. It didn't work.
But can't Israel weaken Hezbollah so much that the Lebanese will be bolder about taking back their country?
I don't know what that means. So what does that mean? So we can destroy more of their rockets. Okay, we'll destroy more of their rockets, but that has no impact on internal Lebanese politics. That has to do with us, etc. Let's just to say that most of the Hezbollah forces that were not blown up in the Beeper and whatever else who were on the first lines all moved north of Litani. So they're all still there with their guns. The only way to get them is if we go in and get them all. But that requires us literally capturing, most of Lebanon. We want to do, look what it's taken us to do Jabalia. Do you want us to do house-to-house fighting in Beirut? I mean, that's when it comes
No, of course not.
That's the problem. It'd be great if we could do it, but it's much better if we can get the Iranian regime change in Iran, cut off their money and cut off their reason for doing things. That is the only way things can actually work. And again, it require an American administration and European countries together to decide that's in the world's interest to undermine the Iranian regime. I don't know. We haven't seen it from any president along the way, despite the fact the Iranians, look, they targeted Americans from the very beginning. Go back to Carter. Carter should have declared war on Iran after they took our hostages, but he wasn't going to do that, obviously. But that's really, they should have never been allowed to do that. But we've been through 30 years, Republicans and Democrats, and there's been policies ups and downs and agreements and not agreements and sanctions more and sanctions less. the British announced today they're willing to go to the clawback of the original high sanction regime that existed against Iran before the agreement. Will all the other countries go back and do that? Well, it won't help as much because right now Russia and China are trading with them. The whole reason the agreement went into place by Obama, by the way, people don't really remember that. Obama went into the agreement with Iran was because the sanction regime was about to expire, and the Russians and Chinese said they were not willing to renew. So if the Chinese and Russians were not willing to renew, then he came to the conclusion the only thing we could do to pressure Iran was to come to an agreement with them. That's what happened. Right now, but what does maximum pressure mean? Maximum pressure is great, except Russia's trading with them. Russia's buying, well, hopefully they're not buying any missiles because they don't have, because we're hopefully destroying that. But they're buying missiles, they were buying drones, they were giving them technology. There's a strong trade between them. And so is strong trade with China. And so as long as that's going on, no sanction is going to make any difference or significant difference. It's not a good situation, and there's no good solutions, and I don't think it'll make a difference who becomes president of the United States right now relating to that. But we'll see. Anybody else? Nancy.
I had a conversation with two neighbors of mine yesterday on the way home from shul, and they told me that one of their kids is in the IDF right now, and he was in Gaza for a while, and then he was sent up to Lebanon, and he just got home from a month up in Lebanon, and he told them that as a result of the actions by the IDF in Lebanon, Israel had been able to bring back residents of 4 communities in the north. I hadn't heard anything about that. Have you?
Not true, false.
Oh,
They,
okay.
what they've done, okay, let me rephrase that. We've made it possible for the theoretical return of the residents. It's not that they've actually returned. As a matter of fact, I heard one of the not mayors, but community leaders, whatever, basically say today that he's opposed to anybody returning at this point until it's very clear what's going to happen and what sort of agreement there may or may not be, how is it enforceable, and also what money the government is giving for rebuilding the North. Because a lot of these communities have been, I won't say largely destroyed, but extremely damaged, let's put it that way. And the new budget that was theoretically laid out does not give nearly enough money for rebuilding it. So no one has returned until now. Let's put it that way. Will they return? I don't know. So yes, Murray. Unmute yourself, Murray.
Done. Hi.
Okay. Hi.
I was wondering, with the election happening next week and winter coming up very soon, do you see those two things bringing any change in what's happening in Gaza?
Okay. Look, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. Look, on one hand, Netanyahu bet long on Trump for a long time. They say back in last January, he was betting that Trump would become president and therefore is holding out for a Trump presidency. I'm not sure what he was holding out for exactly because Trump has made it. I'm leaving aside the partisan part of this for a moment, but Trump has stated recently that he wants to make sure that the war must be ended before he becomes president. So I'm not really sure what was in Netanyahu's mind, and especially since at best it's a toss-up right now. At best. Maybe a little bit leaning towards Harris, but who knows? But it's the best toss-up. No one knows who's going to be president. So I wouldn't bet the future of this country on who's going to become the next president.
Either way, it's just the fact that there'll be a new president coming.
Right, but keep in mind the fact that again, to go back to what I said about Iran, people forget the fact that on November 7th, assuming that by then we know who the president is, I'm giving you an extra day or two. Whoever was elected is not the president of the United States. It's not like Great Britain where an election is held and the next day the new prime minister takes office. Thankfully it's not the way it was when Roosevelt became president, the period until he became president was until March 4th. And they changed it after that period of time because it was just too long. So now down to January 20th, but that's a long time. It's 3 full months. An awful lot can happen in this world in 3 full months. And Biden, like I said, will no longer, however the election is affecting his decisions, he will no longer be constrained by that. Again, I don't know what that means. And anyone who does know what it means, again, is making stories up. Too many people think they know too much. And some people may know some raw intelligence, not me, not you, but some people may have some raw intelligence. I'm being more and more convinced that very few of them even understand the raw intelligence they're seeing sometimes. So we do not know, and I have no idea, and I wouldn't hazard a guess to say how that's going to affect Biden. I think he's going to try very hard to bring some sort of a hostage deal and put whatever pressure he can on Bibi to bring about a hostage deal during that period. I think he genuinely cares about the hostages and is going to try to bring about a deal. Whether he'll succeed, I do not know. So
the problem isn't Israel for the hostages; it's Hamas.
No, but it's Israel too, because Hamas is saying if you get out of Gaza, we'll give you. That's what they've been saying all along.
Yeah,
Never changed their position. Now, I'm not sure what we're accomplishing right now in Gaza. That's the question. And the question is, if we get out of Gaza and we're seeing Hamas and Hamas starts themselves up again, once we get back the hostages, nothing stops us from going back in. Nothing's, I mean, it'll be a pain in the neck, etc. But nothing is going to stop us at this point. We're not going to be afraid of the missile fire and starting a war. We're not going to be afraid of any of those things. We're not going to be afraid of Hezbollah anymore because they've already fired what they can. So if Hamas comes back to power and starts trying to organize against us, we can go back in 6 months from now or 3 months from now. Meanwhile, we'll get the hostages home. The problem with the hostage deal, from Netanyahu's point of view, is it'll require releasing of terrorists from prisons. And Smotrich and Ben-Gvir basically said that they will walk out of the coalition if we allow hostages with blood on their hands, release them, terrorists, excuse me. Now, we can have a long discussion about that. Right? It's a moral question. You're letting go people with blood on their hands. Do we do that in order to get the live hostages back? I'm willing to have that discussion with people, but let's not hide behind the fact that is the discussion. That is the issue. It's not ending the war. It's not pulling out of Gaza. It's not Philadelphia. It's the issue that in order to get back hostages, we have to release terrorists. That's what it is. We can discuss it. It's a moral question. There's issues there, etc. But as one of the hostage families said a few minutes ago on TV, he said, we're between the possibility of bad things happening in the future and the certainty of bad things happening in the present.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the question. Penny.
Mark, yeah, I'm sorry. I saw something recently where supposedly Biden threatened Israel that within a month, if a certain amount of aid wasn't in Gaza, he would cut off Israeli military aid. And it seemed like the problem, at least from our point of view, was that not that enough aid wasn't going in, but it wasn't getting to where it should be because of Hamas. Is there any truth to this at all, this threat?
Okay, yes. There's truth to it. I think I wrote about it. The issue goes back to the, I forgot the name of the law that was passed years ago that said that if a country does not allow humanitarian aid to get to people, that the United States cannot provide it with arms. I forgot the name of the law that was passed. And the people who passed it, some of them made a big deal in Congress. And Israel then, the government got Israel to agree and sent a letter saying that they would ensure the fact that enough aid and a certain number of trucks would get in. And therefore, the United States did not impose the sanctions that were required by that law into effect. Then suddenly, about 6 weeks ago, the amount of aid getting in dropped dramatically. Now, the reality is that this past month in October, and I wrote about this a couple of days ago, only 1/3 of the monthly aid got in that normally gets in any given month. Now, I also gave the reasons that were stated by the government or stated by Kogat, which is responsible for it. That's complicated. Had to do partly with the holidays, partly with the fact that the aid on the other side isn't picking it up, that it's accumulating, that not enough aid is being sent by international organizations. There are a whole long list of reasons why not enough aid is going in. I frankly do not understand it. I think we need to find solutions and just make it happen. So I think we're making a mistake by just not flooding it with aid. It's a problem. Hamas gets the aid, but that's because we didn't create anything else instead. So, um, you know, we are not playing. We've never played this information game, and that's at least one of the areas that needs to be played. We're not playing it. I mean, we should be showing how much aid is flowing in every single moment. We're not doing that. So that's what that story is. I don't know where it's going to go. Hopefully, the government will do things in the next week or two to speed up the amount of aid that's going in, even if it's against some of our interests, which it is. But on the other hand, it's a year already. It's a year. How long can we expect these people? Look, a high percentage of people in Gaza supported Hamas, but some significant portion of them didn't support Hamas. And at what point do we realize we need to do something about the rest of the people there? And let me say one last thing. Israelis are completely cut off from the knowledge of any suffering that's taking place in Gaza. We do not hear it. We do not see it. It's far from our minds. I understand why it's far from our minds. We are constantly bombarded with the stories of, families, soldiers who've been killed, and their orphans and the kids and everything else, and it's emotionally very difficult. But there is a humanity on the other side, and we need to find a way of putting just a little bit of our heart for that humanity, just the same, because it's worse if we become them. I forgot who made the statement, I forgot who made the statement, but basically it's really bad. All these terrible things are happening to us. It said, it was it was the Holocaust scholar who just died, who said, could have been any worse than it was in the Holocaust? Yeah, the worst could have been if we had been the Germans. So that's part of the answer. Anybody else? Okay, last call if anyone has any more questions. Okay, so we'll do this again in 2 weeks. I don't know what's going to happen in these next 2 weeks. Lots of unknowns like usual. Living in uncertain times, and of course, something is going to happen in the United States on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday when someone who will be elected president. How that'll affect us here, I do not know. I will actually finish with my slight interference in American elections to frame it in a way I thought was very, very good without taking sides between one or the other. And that is the following. You can accept this or not accept this, but from the Democratic side, leaving aside the claims that Harris is an extreme leftist, God knows what, but assuming she's a moderate Democrat, we're most likely to get Biden minus. She's not going to have the same love that Biden has, but we know what the policies are going to be, give or take. And that's what we're going to get if Harris gets elected president. A Democratic administration that's going to follow more or less the same policies as previous Democratic administrations have followed. They've been good, they've been bad. They were better under Clinton than under Obama, but none of them left Israel high and dry, let's put it that way. With Trump, you have two possibilities. Either he's going to be a lot better or he's going to be a lot worse. What do I mean? Either he's a much more lover of Israel, going to tell Israel, do whatever you want, destroy Iran, etc., 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 or the isolationists who surround him, like Vance and others, will have the stronger say, and the American foreign policy will move to much more isolationist, which will ultimately include Israel. So the reality is, if you want to take a risk, and I'm leaving aside everything about American domestic policy for a second, I won't touch that at all for the moment. If you want to take a risk, if you're looking only from Israel's perspective, a risky bet is Trump. It could be a lot better, but it could also be a lot worse. If you go with Harris, it will not be a lot better than Biden, but it's not likely to be much worse than Biden. That's really the choice in terms of if it's an Israel only vote. Everything else, make your own calculations and your own views. But that's how I look upon it when I look at it from a purely Israeli perspective. Which way do you want to go? The risk or the not risk between the two options. Anyway, have a happy election. Wait, Nancy Kaplan has raised her hand. Last minute. I'll give you an extra 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Define better.
Okay.
What
Defining
better-
from an Israeli perspective is those B-52 bombers that are sitting in Qatar right now that we don't know the United States has until now not wanted to use, that the United States participates in an attack on Iran. That's better. The United States takes military action against the Iranian nuclear program. That's better. The United States puts no restrictions whatsoever on arms to Israel and says to the Israelis, you can do whatever you want in Iran and we're going to resupply you. I'm thinking from we're going to resupply you 100% with all the bombs you need, everything you need, even though we don't have enough bombs in the United States. That would be, from a purely Israeli straight perspective, better than a policy that says, wait, you've killed too many people in Gaza, we're going to have to cut back the number of bombs we're going to give you. That's a direction that you could possibly see a Democratic administration going. That's the better part. That's the possibility better. That's my that's how I would look upon it. I mean, I didn't say personally I think it's better, but that's from a purely Israeli perspective, that's better. If you're a Bibi supporter, it's definitely better to have Trump because everyone on the Democrats hate Bibi, but then most of Israelis hate him too at this point, but we'll leave that part aside. That's a different story altogether. Okay. Anyway, I wish you all a happy Elections Day, whoever you're rooting for.
Thank you, Mark.
And we'll see you all
Thank
again
you,
in
Mark.
2 weeks.